and welcome to Out of the Box, the podcast where we talk film, music, and turning your passion into a career. This week, we have the pleasure of welcoming our second guest on the podcast in the form of live sound engineer, Louis Grogan. Welcome.
Hello. Hiya.
How are you doing, mate? You good?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, you?
Yeah, sound man, sound. Good. So basically, this podcast is about speaking with creatives, fellow creatives in the industry, and their story of how they sort of like got to be where they are now, sort of turning their passion into a career, as stated in the intro.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I just want to ask you about your sort of journey into where you find yourself today. Was it like a conventional sort of like studying it, then going, or?
No, it was the opposite, really. So I kind of got bored of education and then still ended up in education at college, but was doing like music tech. And then luckily one of my tutors was good friends with a guy from the company I work for now, and he kind of just gave me an email address and was like, do your best. I ended up emailing them, and then they were just like, come in, show you can work. And you start at the roots and you just like pushing cases, loading trucks, basically doing the back work for the gigs or the engineers to go out and do the gigs. And then eventually you just work your way up. You're working with the equipment all day, every day, so you learn it, and you know, you end up on the shows just shadowing people, and before you know it, you're getting your own chances, and as long as you don't mess them up, you work your way up pretty quickly.
Yeah. So for like the viewers and listeners that don't know, like, what is your job role like?
So my job role is a bit mad, because I work for like a PA supplier, so it ranges a lot. We do basically every role on the audio side of a gig. So that can be putting the PA in the air and tuning the PA to make sure it sounds good for the arena. It could also be working directly for a band, so you could be their front of house engineer or their monitor engineer. It could also be the smaller roles, which is just like patching on a festival stage. I say smaller roles, it's just as important and harder than most, but it just includes, you know, when two bands are switching over, being that guy who's in charge of everything. Yeah, it's pretty much that. And obviously there's roles where you're just the extra pair of hands to do all these jobs because they're not easy, they're very time consuming. So
yeah,
you know, you get into an arena at maybe 5 or 6 a.m. and you know you've got to be ready by 2 p.m. for sound check. So you've got to have the right amount of people there who all know what they're doing.
What sort of drawn you to sort of the more live environment rather than sort of studio-based sound? Obviously, I'm a studio-based engineer.
Yeah, well,
you know,
I love studio as well, to be honest. It's like seeing both sides is great, but I just I kind of hate routine. I hate going to the same place every day and doing the same thing. Like, you know, just being told I'm going to be working in this place and getting to see all these different places is quite cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found myself like in my earlier jobs just getting bored of going to the same place every day and doing the same thing. So yeah.
Me and Ollie have said in previous podcasts that like when we've worked for live shows, so we video live shows and like you worked with us on one of them actually, didn't you, about capturing audio and stuff. We sort of said that we enjoy the sort of element of sort of if you mess up, then you mess up, like the sort of the pressure that
redos.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think, Ollie?
Yeah, it sounds like as well from describing that you can't just you're not in a job role where you go to work every day and you do the same thing with the same responsibilities. It sounds like you've got a large skill set, you know, a lot of things in your toolkit that you've got to change week in, week out for sort of what you do. You say that's like important for the job role, sort of being flexible, not just for it being live and you can't redo it, but in, you know, you're doing a different thing week in, week out.
Yeah, 100%. That's it. It's like you've just said, there's so much pressure on everything you do. Like some people, you know, don't handle it very well. That's how it is. But you get shown this role a few times and you've just got to adapt and learn it. And the first time you do a role and you're the guy in charge is always really nerve-wracking because you're just like, if I don't do this right, the gig's going to get cancelled and there's going to be, you know, anywhere from 1,000 to 20,000 people going home really sad today because they don't get to see a show.
Yeah.
So it's
that's part of the enjoyment though, right? That pressure.
Yeah, 100%. If there's no better reward from our job than when, like, you know, the gig's just happening, you hear the crowd cheer and you're just like, yeah, we've smashed it there. That's great.
Yeah. And do you think going back to sort of when you started, that's something that you not struggled with, but like was a bit of a shock to you? Because I imagine it's not something you can like practice over and over again. You can't just practice a festival with 100,000 people in the crowd. Like being like put into that environment must be a bit daunting. I imagine the first ones you did were like, right.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I feel like you've got to be really good with like constructive criticism because for your first festival, obviously everyone knows it's your first festival that you're working with, but the pressure is just there, and in your own head more than anyone else's, you just kind of like, I've got to do well here.
Yeah, because even though it's your first one, it's like the quality can't just drop because you've got someone new on the show. Yeah,
exactly that. And you're never just going to get thrown into the big roles. You do work your way up, but it's just that thing, and it's a very competitive industry as well. So it's entirely on you if you mess something up. It's not, though it might affect that one gig, it's then going to affect you for the next gigs rather than anyone else. Because you're trying to work your way up and prove that you're better than everyone else. How
would you say, I suppose in any creative role, how would you say when you're ready to do that sort of like next step up?
In all honesty, I don't think you do. I think it's just like my personal experience has just been like, you're doing this, and I'll be like, oh yeah, dead excited about it, like this is gonna be cool. And then on the day that you're doing it, it's always a bit like, oof, I hope I do this. A few deep breaths, and you're like, let's get this right.
I was speaking to a friend the other day who's like slowly getting into like more photography world, and she was nervous that a shoot got offered to her, and she was like, oh, it's a bit out of my depth, so I might say no. And the conversation we sort of had was like, but that offer will come to you in 6 months' time, and you'll probably still say, I'm not ready. You're never going to be ready until you sort of,
That's never the right time, is it? Like,
no,
you just got to sometimes do it. Like, this has been a theme within our podcast, hasn't it? And like when we've been speaking to ourselves, and last week with Rob, like sometimes you've just got to do it.
Yeah, 100%.
And throw yourself in at the deep end and just do it and learn from that. And sort of sticking with that, have you ever had like any setbacks? So sort of like we're talking about getting things wrong. Like sometimes you have to get things. I mean, I'm speaking through experience. Like I've made mistakes, or not mistakes, but like creative decisions that haven't worked, or decisions that haven't worked in the studio that I've learned from.
Yeah, but I mean, none of them have really been setbacks for me, luckily. But in specific roles that I was mentioning before, like when you mix in front of house, for example, you're never going to get anywhere unless you play about with it and just get creative. And that's the scariest thing ever, because like when you're starting out and you haven't seen some of these mixing desks before, and someone will go, oh, you've got this gig, and you're like, cool, dead excited for this gig, and then like it's on this desk, and you're like, I don't know how to use that. It gets to the point where you know most desks and you're happy, but when you first turn up and you're trying to figure it out, or you do it a few days before and you're kind of like, this isn't what I want on this gig, and it just takes that telling yourself, I'll be sound here, I just need to work around.
I felt like that in uni. So like in my university, basically, like in first year you started off at like this level of studio, then second year you unlocked more studios, and then third year you got to unlock like the big boy studios. And I suppose like from first year to third year is like a big jump in terms of like size of desk and like how much stuff's on it and stuff like that. But I suppose if you know the fundamentals, which is sort of what uni taught you, like if you know how to use the smaller desks, get to sort of familiarise yourself with sort of like workflow and stuff like that. Sort of does that apply in live? Like obviously I'm speaking from a studio sort of perspective. So like if you learn the fundamentals of like with the smaller desks, all of desks are sort of same, just with extra features or menu dipping, or
that's exactly it. Yeah, it's just the speed you can get around them and stuff like that, and how comfortable you are. Because obviously this is where it differs a little bit from studio. Like if you're mixing a gig on a desk you don't know and something goes wrong, it's how quickly can you figure out that desk to fix it. Because you can't just go hold the gig a minute, let me fix this. But it's like you say, all desks are exactly the same essentially. You've just got to, they all have the same formula, and you just got to figure it out.
Yeah, I can imagine it's similar with like working with cameras and stuff, and when you go, you're expected to transfer your skills from, say, working with like a Canon system, then you work at a certain job and they run like Blackmagic or they run Sony, whatever. It's sort of getting over that fact that it's not going to be the same every day.
Yeah, that's it.
And it is daunting, because you if you get to the job and it's this desk but used to this one, it's sort of like, well, show must go on.
Yeah, exactly. But it only makes you better as well, when you use more and more stuff, and it, like you get to the point, like I'm pretty comfortable now with pretty much anything that gets in front of me.
Yeah. Just experience then, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah.
And learning and being ready to sort of be thrown into an uncontrolled environment on a day-to-day basis.
So would your biggest tip to sort of someone wanting to learn sort of your craft to just go out and practice on as many different sort of systems as they can?
100%, yeah. That's the tough thing about our industry as well, though, because everything's so expensive that it's really hard to get that go of just like having a go and getting hands-on with all this stuff. But like if you can just get savvy on it and get done, so you know someone puts something in front of you and you're like, oh, I do it like this.
Yeah.
And that's more important than the actual creative sides, essentially, I think. And then the creative side comes next, and that's what takes you from being an okay engineer to a good engineer, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you advise people sort of like, I know from excuse me, when I was at uni, like I got told to, if I fancied learning something a little bit different and wanted to go sort of more into the live industry, because my uni was majority like studio based, sort of like teaching and things like that. But they advised to just get out in like bars and small sort of like grassroots venues, and do sound in them sort of like scenarios and work with like the smaller bands and stuff. Would you say that is beneficial to sort of work your way up and get to the point where you're at now?
100%, yeah. Because even the company I work for, they're kind of, this goes back to what you're saying about the getting thrown in the deep end as well. Their kind of way of learning is to put you on, they look after certain venues, and they'll put you in these venues week in, week out, just in between anything else they can give you. You're always at this venue. And obviously you get very used to the equipment, but then that's when the creative side comes in, and just practicing and working with different scenarios. Like one day you might have a 4-piece rock band turn up, and then it might be a 16-piece orchestra, and you're like, you know, okay, let's work on this. And that just helps so much. So that, I mean, that's the only experience I've had in that kind of scenario, but I think for anyone else it'd be perfect. Just get out and try it.
Yeah. So if someone's in a similar position to where you were, you know, what, like 16, 17, looking to go to college, it's sort of an industry that you can't just tap into, you know, and apply for. You don't just drop your CV off, do you? Really, it's something that you've sort of got to get to know people, put your name out there and stuff. If someone was in that similar position with an interest in live sound or music tech like you, that's just the way to do it. Get yourselves to venues, put your name in, or even if it's just, you know, watching, shadowing for a little while, and then sort of your opportunity will come and you sort of grow you through the bars and through the clubs and stuff.
Yeah, 100%. That's all I'd really be able to recommend, because that's essentially how I did it. I mean, I was lucky with the opportunity I got to go to this company and just start working my way up. But, you know, the first bit was essentially just warehouse work, and it's the back, like I said. But once you start going on the roads, as they call it, you know, that's all you're doing. It's just getting thrown into these small gigs. You might not even enjoy half of them. It's just you're there to learn the trade, learn the craft. But yeah, it's all going to help. Any hands-on stuff you can get, it's going to be the best way.
So I know you've done some really big things last year, and we'll obviously move on to those in a minute. But before we sort of move on to the big stuff and the big arenas and festivals that I know you enjoy, let's look a little bit close to home, more of like the grassroots stuff. Is there any like venues or gigs that stand out for you this year? Maybe like sub 1,000 cap that you've done that you've really enjoyed, or bands that you've worked with that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah, there's been a couple actually. One that I'd definitely like to mention is the Cheap Thrills. They are absolutely smashing it. They're like a self-promoted band, and they've started selling out. Well, they're doing the O2 Academy 1 soon. We've done a gig in the Hangar 34.
Yeah, because you went to that, didn't you?
I went to that. Yeah,
I couldn't go that night, but you said it was really good.
Yeah, it was class.
So I've been mixing front of house for them since we bumped into them. Well, it was in the O2 Academy actually, but the smaller room years back. And they're just an absolutely incredible band. The fans just absolutely love it, and the gig is crazy. And that, for me, as well as the band on stage, just makes everything better. As well as that, I've done, well, you guys, BAV Club.
It does, yeah, and that was a really good night. It turned out really well.
It was a really, really good gig. I think
you've passed my secret test then, Lou, because I was going to ask that question. If we didn't come up, it'd have been really awkward.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was. I really enjoyed that gig. Like, honestly, it was. Obviously, we had Elliot doing the lights as well, who's a friend, so we were having a great time front of house, and then it was just, I just feel like the vibe of that gig, as well as you guys having fun on stage, obviously supports that you're close with as well, were brilliant.
Yeah.
And the whole gig was just absolutely bouncing. It was loads of
challenging though, wasn't it?
It was challenging, yeah. It wasn't easy, especially.
There's a few bumps in the road early on.
Yeah,
when we found out that the stage is run off one
power outlet.
Oh my goodness!
I bet you know. I obviously can't speak for you, but do you not find in the smaller venues that you're often tasked with bigger challenges, because these huge venues and huge arenas are just ready-made, they're good to go. Whereas the smaller venues, obviously, like Joe just said, for our gig, we wanted to move in, and we didn't want to go into a, you know, I don't want to call it a subpar venue, but we wanted to make the small venue feel like a huge show.
Yeah.
So for us, that meant really thinking about lights, really thinking about sound, and the small venues just couldn't facilitate us. We were trying to plug in how much power?
Oh my God, it was
we had one power
crazy.
outlet.
Yeah, I mean, like before I'd even plugged any of the backline in with you guys, it was just no power. There was just not enough for us to run it. And then as well as that, you were like looking at, I won't name the venue, but looking at the PA when we walked in there, obviously you guys will have booked the venue with them saying we've got a full PA, and you walk in and the sub drivers are just hanging out, and I'm just like, here we go. And that, it goes to like the compromises of studio and live. Like you turn up and you've got no low end, and in my head I'm just going, right, that's anything under 80 hertz doesn't exist
for a band like us
kit,
as well, which is like all our tracks are just sub.
Yeah, and it's in my head, all I've got before that gig is just I want to make them sound massive. I want this to be like, because your kind of music good for that as well. There's a lot of like synthy stuff and sample stuff, and it comes out huge. Like you can make it sound really good. But my God, that was a struggle.
Yeah.
And you're completely right in saying the smaller gigs are harder because
you're never going to run into that at like the O2 Academy, like you've just mentioned. That's not going to be a problem of there's no power on stage or the PA is not up to scratch.
That's it. And it's just space as well. Like space to do things. Like even when you're just putting a microphone up on a stand, if there's stuff in the way, it's always just like, you don't want the, like, obviously it was you in this case, but you don't want the singer stepping back, kicking the microphone, and it was just crazy. But yeah, that was a incredible gig regardless of all that.
It turned out amazing.
Yeah.
Considering the challenges, like it came out really well. I was buzzing with it. So
I don't think a single person in that room went home sad. They just
or
sober, yeah. But they all just, every single person just had a great time.
Yeah, it was good.
We've done 2 headlines in Warrington, and both times the bars run out of beer.
They did, yeah.
I don't know if it's a coincidence or something's going on with our fan base. Yeah,
our fan base is alcoholics.
Yeah.
My mum fell down the stairs at our first headline in Warrington. Shout out to you, mum.
Love that.
No, I mean, it was good, that gig. But you think, those smaller venues, when you go in, obviously it's not an easy fix, so there's more to it than just make it better. But obviously that grassroots music is there, isn't it? It's just nice sometimes when the facilities can match the band, because not every band is going to get to play the O2 Academy.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's all about opportunities, isn't it? But that's why it's such a thing for bands to get to that bigger level, because it's not just how many people are watching you, it's just how good you can sound, because with bigger venues comes better equipment in 90% of cases.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get onto that better equipment and you've got people who know what they're doing mixing, and it changes bands. Like you see it, this massive climb that a band will go on just happens once they get that one support tour or that one big gig.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this isn't exactly a question for you. I guess this is a question for the group. But do you think, say if we'd have played that gig in Warrington with a subpar PA and with no lights and stuff, and we didn't sound good, do you think that's more damaging than not playing it? But then how do you grow? How do you get into bigger venues if no one's seen you? How can everyone see you great if they never saw you shit? Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you do?
I think that's the problem that the current sort of industry faces, isn't it? That the smaller venues just aren't being funded enough.
Yeah, because it wasn't the venue's fault that they didn't have a full light rig and stuff, because it's expensive. The money's obviously not there. But then you're not going to attract the right bands because they're not going to drop down to a level. Warrington is like a really, centre point. Lochran is playing at the Park Hall. Huge gig, huge band. But they're not going to come to the smaller venues, and Warrington's not going to be taken seriously if it's not got the venues to back it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
But I just don't know. I just don't really know what you.
The likes of Manchester has and Liverpool have fairly decent smaller venues, don't they? But it's just.
But even then, you come across a venue that's like, do we want to play it because we've had a bad experience in the past? I don't know what the give and take, where the balance lies.
See, I think like really good, like people from really good labels and stuff should be able to see past the fact that you're on a bad PA and in a bad venue and stuff. But like for the fans and like word of mouth and stuff, if you do a gig that sounds amazing in a bad venue, even the fans realise that, and they will go out and then speak to their friends and go, this band's great, and before you know it, you've doubled your listens on Spotify, your publicity's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's that kind of thing. I think that helps. But
suppose you got to take the advantages of it. Like you just said, if you can sound good in a bad every band is going to play a bad venue with 2 people in the crowd, aren't they?
Yeah.
But if you can make that bad venue sound the best you can make it, and those 2 people have a really good time and really enjoy your music, then it's 2 more listeners, isn't it?
We watched lottery. Not saying this is a bad venue, but we watched lottery winners at Casimir Gardens.
Yeah.
and it sounded mint, and that's like a really small venue. And then they've played like
the arena.
Yeah,
and sounded just as good. So
it's a shame as well though, because the big bands that go back to do like intimate gigs at small venues, when they've got the money and the budget to make it sound and look good and stuff like that, there's no gig that gets close to it. Like, you wouldn't bother going to an arena, even though you've got the atmosphere of thousands of people. There's nothing better than seeing, like, years ago I went to watch a band called Yonica, and it was in the shipping forecast. Didn't think anything of it. My mate was like, come with us and watch, tickets for $5. I was like, yeah. The gig was absolutely amazing. Like, it was brilliant. And like, I'd never heard of this band before, and then literally 5 or 6 days later I was in work and someone was like, we're doing the Cortinas next week, we need to look at this support band Yonica. And I was like, what, they're supporting the Cortinas? And they were like, yeah. I was like, where? And they were like, arenas. I was like, no way. And then before you know it, they're huge.
I suppose it was like what we were speaking about before, like the 1975 going back to play Gorilla.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fairly small venue, isn't it, compared to what they've been playing the last few months. Like, that's going to be absolutely nuts, but because they've got the money behind them to sort of...
Yeah, it'll be incredible.
It's just going to be mad. That is going to be an insane gig.
Gorilla's a class gig. Some of the best gigs I've seen in Manchester for smaller bands have been in Gorilla.
Yeah.
It's always like looked great. It always sounds amazing. So for a band that size, considering they've just done Manchester Arena, they dropped to Gorilla, what's like $650 cap or something like that.
Yeah, it's
insane, isn't it?
It's just going to be mad.
It's going to be sweaty.
Yeah.
So obviously you've worked on like a fair few gigs now and worked with like quite a lot of artists and things like that. Obviously, you've gonna have to have had so far like a career highlight up until now. What would you say yours is? Have you got one? Can you pinpoint one?
It's tough, to be honest. I mean, I enjoyed like getting a role at Glastonbury last year. That was it's going to be up there for everyone, isn't it? Because I remember years ago, before I was even in the industry, watching it on TV, and I was like, oh, I want to go there. And then to be working there now, once I understand what it's all about, is incredible. And there was a few other ones, like Ep06, actually. They're just a band, you know, everyone's heard a couple of songs from. And then that was what we were just saying about the small bar gigs. I was just working for the O2 Academy in Liverpool, and they just came up on the bill one day, and I expected them to stand up with their own engineer. I kind of handed everything over, but they didn't. They were like, can you do it for us? I was like, yes, sound. And it was incredible, yeah. So that's got to be up there. But to be honest, I've had, like, the job's really entertaining. You get so many good experiences from it. Like, it's more of a lifestyle than it is a job as well.
Yeah. We said on our first or second podcast that if you can find a career that doesn't feel like work, then you've kind of hit the jackpot, I suppose. And I suppose that's how you're feeling as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's like getting out of bed in the morning, you know, when you're motivated to go to work. You're like, it's not as tough, is it? So yeah. One
of my questions was actually linking back to festival season. Sorry if you were going to ask.
No, you're good. No, go.
Linking back to festival season, just whilst I've seen it on my list and you've been speaking about Glastonbury, one of the questions I had was like, how is it working on like festivals? Like, is it different to like a sort of like a more contained sort of in a building, in a venue kind of thing, to being like external?
Yeah, it's a crazy experience. Like, obviously, we have the certain season every year where we just do festivals, so you get used to it after a couple of years. But it's a big change from like an arena gig or something. Like, everything's ran off generators, so it's all temporary power. Obviously, we have ways of checking it all, making sure it's safe and stuff like that. But even just to being outdoors and, you know, like, well, not going home of a night, so you're showering in temporary showers, and, you know, it's great. But I mean, it's another one of them rewarding things. Like, the reactions you get from festivals are just insane, and you put all that work into, like, because obviously the stage is temporary and everything is temporary. It's really satisfying when you see thousands of people stood there just cheering and having a good time.
Is the sound at festivals, this is one thing I've always noticed from when I've been to them, is that obviously it's never going to sound the same as being in a venue, because obviously you've got all your factors, and being outside, there's no sort of like sound bouncing off walls and stuff like that. How is it to work that? Like, is it harder? Is it different? Do you have to change your workflow completely, or is it translate fairly well?
Well, it's a lot harder for the system techs. So we have people in our place who are just specialists in tuning the systems, and that can be for many things. It can be to make it, like, it primarily is to make it even everywhere, so everyone hears the same thing. But it can also be for like off-site noise limits, which you get a lot of at festivals. So it sometimes makes it harder when you're mixing at festivals, because you've had to turn the sub level down. All the low end frequencies are causing trouble off site, so you've got to turn them down. So it makes it harder to get that sound you want. Obviously, from the studio, you can just kind of make things sound how you want them, and that's good. But you have all these limitations at festivals, and you don't necessarily get them as much at arenas. But then it can be the opposite, really, because sometimes in arenas, the shape of the arena, or like how many people are in there, will affect the room. And sometimes if the gig doesn't sell well enough, they'll close off certain bits of the arena, and it just changes everything. These system techs are very, very clever people who they have loads of ways to deal with this, and they try and make it sound as normal as possible for when you start mixing.
We've said when we've been to Neighbourhood in Warrington before, haven't we, that it always seems quite quiet.
Yeah, but that makes sense, because it's very much within the town. There's houses, very close and stuff. So if there's a limit, then that makes sense.
Probably why it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, as opposed to like Leeds and Reading Festival, which I imagine is like they're literally in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
that's it. Well, Glastonbury, again, because it's so big and so out of the way, they can just do whatever they want, essentially. Obviously, there's still restrictions for people's hearing and stuff like that, but it's never really off-site limits. Even when you're sleeping at Glastonbury, it's just noise. The whole thing is just 24/7. It's amazing.
It's mad. Creamfields is like pretty local to us in Warrington. It's like near like Daresbury Laboratories, isn't it? And when that's on, because they're like DJs and stuff, the bass and the sub just carries through the air so much, and you can hear it. I can open my window and literally listen to like David Guetta or something. Like it's like clear as day. It's mad.
No comment. No, that's it. Well, they have like there's specific companies the festivals hire, and they give us restrictions and so on. They work out what's the best happy medium, basically, to not like annoy everyone off site, but also so the people at the gig can have a good time. So when you say about Neighbourhood, that's probably why. If there's houses everywhere,
it's pretty built up around there, isn't it? It's right near the town centre and stuff.
Yeah. So just describe that feeling then. Obviously, you said, the buzz of the festival happening when the crowd are in and stuff. Obviously, you given a gig. It works on anything you do, but let's call it a festival, and you're loading in, you're seeing this empty field.
Yeah.
How's that feel to be part of that whole like progression? So you get there in an empty field, and then you're setting up, and then you have like the elation of the crowd and stuff. And how's that? Well, the moment after. Well, I was going to say the moment after, but then you're probably thinking, "Oh, it's a big pack down."
Yeah,
you've packed down. You've just done the whole thing.
Oh, that's really rewarding. Yeah, it's one of them things. Like you stood there, you have them moments where you just stood looking. Like you might be on the stage or at front of house or whatever, and you're just looking out, just going, "Wow!" Like it's really satisfying to know that we're part of the reason why this is happening.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there's hundreds and hundreds of people who put them shows on. Like it's all the people behind the scenes, just still organising it and stuff like that. It's crazy.
That sort of leads on to what I was going to say is that feeling of being part of like a machine and being part of like a big team, and sort of having your role to like I don't know, a massive band's on, and it's like the end of the festival and everyone's singing back and the fireworks going off and stuff. Like sort of nice to sit there and feel like you had a role in that.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, we still, I can't speak for everyone else in the industry, but me personally, I still get a bit of a buzz out of like just the festival vibe, just being at the festival. And even when you're working, it's just a nice place to be, and you're surrounded by people having a good time and all that. And to see it build up, and like obviously we get the behind the scenes of it essentially. It's great. It's very, very cool.
I don't know what my voice did.
No, I totally get that. I feel like the main times I have that feeling as well is from live shows. So being on like, done camera a couple of times on stage, and like the Lottery Winner springs to mind when they did the MEA, and like that moment where you're like, oh, one, this is amazing, and the people I know, this is just really cool, and you're sort of a part of it. It's sort of a part of something bigger than you. It's really cool.
It gets surreal at times, because like I say about watching things on TV when you're a kid and wanting to be there, and then you find yourself like stood on the side of a stage looking out at 20,000.
You go home and watch all the Glastonbury highlights and freeze frame.
100%. Yeah. That's yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So obviously, was it the end of last year and / start of this year that you were on tour?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to do my first like European stint. My role was a bit crazy on it. I was just kind of there as the extra person, like with the audio knowledge. So I was basically an extra set of hands for the system tech. The system tech was extremely clever, and the fact we can go from venue to venue literally on a day-to-day basis, and he's adapted everything for this room. But yeah, the stint was like 2 months, near enough, and it was just incredible. Like, talk about experiences from jobs, it was just amazing.
I suppose that's sort of a perk of the job, being able to travel as well. Like, how was it like traveling with and working with the same sort of band every night? Did you find yourself like at the start being nervous, but then by the end of it you was like absolutely fine, living it up, or was you pretty much straight into it?
Into it pretty quickly. Yeah, the first couple of gigs you always get that bit of everywhere, because I actually joined the tour a bit late as well, because they started with some smaller gigs in like Scandinavia and stuff, and then when they got into like mainland Europe, I joined on for the extra 2 months. So I joined late, so I was a bit like, hello everyone, how are you? I'm the new guy kind of thing. But within a couple of days it was great. And I mean, I was lucky on this tour as well with the traveling side of it, because the way the schedule worked, there was quite a few days off where we'd do a gig, and then we'd travel to another country or city or whatever, and we'd have the rest of the day to just go and explore, and maybe even the day after. It's just a nice way to see the world, essentially. Like,
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. It wasn't the initial plan when I started the job, but
yeah,
it's great.
That's one thing we've said, isn't it, that we love to sort of be able to sort of achieve this year, is to just be able to travel. Like we started traveling sort of the UK last year with like the ultra marathons and then a couple of gigs and stuff. But I think that's something this year that we really want to achieve, and to do our first job abroad. I know it's a big goal for you.
I just need to make sure I don't put myself in holiday mode. I only drove 2 hours up the road, and I'm like, right,
where's the beers? Get the beers out.
What we're doing tonight? And it's like, well, we have a 5 o'clock start. And it's like, well, I'm on holiday.
Yeah,
at least till tomorrow morning.
No, that's it. It's hard to get that. Well, I mean, it's not hard to remember your own work. You still act professional on your days off, even, but it's just it's again a bit of a surreal experience. You're just like, how am I just given a day? And
I think it's the change of scenery, isn't it? Like, if you go into this, and there's nothing wrong with going to work in the same place every day, but that sort of excitement of doing the same thing that's in your skill base, but being in, I don't know, Berlin and then Madrid, wherever the tour was that you did. I don't know all the specifics, but waking up somewhere new, doing the same thing that you obviously enjoy doing, sort of, that's obviously for us, like Scotland and London, it's not exactly abroad.
Yeah.
But that I got that feeling from those type of jobs. So that is something we've
technically Scotland's another country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at you.
Going worldwide.
All right then. Any job that means you get on a plane.
Yeah.
Dublin. We're coming for you.
Yeah. So obviously we spoke about the type of jobs, obviously festivals, live shows, stuff you do. Maybe the more like warehousey stuff. Specifically with like bands and stuff, is there any favourite style of band you work with? Obviously you mentioned like working with an orchestra, but then a 4-piece rock band.
Yeah. Well, my music taste is very open. Like, I listen to a lot of stuff. So, well, my 2 favourites really. I love kind of the heavier rock side of things. Like when you're at a gig and it sounds huge. You've got these incredible artists, and then it all comes together and just sounds brilliant. But then I also like the dance music kind of vibe. It's not as technical for us, which normally means it's a nicer day's work. But I just something about it as well. Obviously, the music can push the PA systems more because it's all digital and stuff like that. It gets it gets really interesting. There's sometimes you've just been stood listening to dance music, and I'm like, wow, that sounds incredible.
Yes. So you wake up thinking, I either can't wait today to watch a heavy rock band, or just jam out to like techno all day.
That's it. Yeah. But then the same thing applies. Like, I really can't pick a favourite, to be honest, because like some things like jazz bands or funk bands, like funk is up there for me. If there's a funk band going, they just you pretty much know it's going to sound amazing.
Usually insane, aren't they? Like I always find that like when you're working with sort of more sort of established artists, which you'll know better than me from the level you're at, like, so one thing I've always enjoyed working with is like good gear and how much of a difference it makes. Like, so like when you work with someone that comes in and brings like a Line 6 Spider, and you're like, oh, you struggle. Okay. Like you can only make something sound like as good as you
100%,
as you can.
Yeah.
But like obviously with the people you're working with, like they're probably touring with like sort of like the creme de la creme, aren't they?
That's it. Well, on that topic, I was working a festival a few years back, and Chic and Nile Rodgers were the headline, and I've always had a soft spot for it. I was like, this is going to be really cool. Luckily, I wasn't busy when this was on. I had some time off, so I went over to the main stage to watch them, and I was stood in front of the house because we did in front of house with a few people, and I just happened to say to the engineer, I was like, mate, this sounds incredible, by the way. Like, this is one of the best things I've ever heard. And I was like, how'd you get it to sound that good? Not to be nosy or anything, but how? And he's like, honestly, I'm not doing a lot, good in, good out. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. And like everyone in our place, I've realised now, sticks to that motto. Like if you've got a really good band on stage with good gear, good microphones, you don't have to do an awful lot. You just fix a couple of things and the band are going to sound great. So I've stuck to that forever since then. But yeah.
Well, but doing that mixture as well, like just going back about, a funk band and a rock band and then doing like, house or whatever, just highlights that point of you enjoy it because it's different. Like if you were doing a rock band every day, or you were doing front of house for a jazz band 7 nights a week, you would probably be like, I fucking hate jazz.
That's, 100%.
Do you like jazz?
Yeah. But the mixture is obviously part of the job, part of the industry of doing something different every day. So
that's it. Well, that's
totally get that.
That's how I highlighted that more than anything, because we'd done like, I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere between like 30 and 40 gigs with Placebo. It was, so it was like a heavy rock kind of thing. And at first I was like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And if I had any free time during the gig, I should be stood out front listening to it and all stuff like that. And then by the end of it, I found myself just being like, oh, it's that same song again. And it's nothing against the song now that I'm off the tour. I'm like, brilliant songs, listen to them, whatever. But when you hear the same thing every day, it might just be my mentality. Other people might be different, but I was just a bit like, oh.
Yeah, but that makes sense. You're just ready for something new then. And then the next tour could be a rock fusion band.
Think of the band, man. Think of the band, especially people that are like touring from like, people are still touring from like the 70s, playing the same songs they were in the 70s. Imagine, they must be well bored, mustn't they? Like,
well, you see some bands getting
God's sake, not Wonderwall again.
Yeah. That's it. You see some bands getting clever with it now though, because they know they're playing the same songs. So like James, James done a tour recently.
They tour loads.
Yeah, but they've got ridiculous amounts of songs as well. So the latest tour they done, it was an Alton Towers tour, to go back to some gig they done in Alton Towers years ago, like in the 90s, I think. And they just played the exact same set because they were like, we haven't played these songs for years. So they didn't even play their famous songs that people probably went to go and see them for. They were just like, it's not what this gig's about. This gig is. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, well, have you seen, Metallica headlining 2 days at Download Festival?
Yeah.
But they're playing on, say, the Friday and the Sunday, for example. I don't know if that's right, but say they're playing them 2 days. They're playing 2 separate sets.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Because they've got that many songs and people want to hear them. That they're just playing they're headlining 2 of the days and playing 2 different sets. I think that's like insane.
Yeah. It's like Arctic Monkeys though. When they played Leeds, I think it was last year, I watched their set. It was like they were playing the original tunes, like, from back in the day, but they'd like put them into the new album style.
Yeah.
So it was like same music, same songs, but I guess so that they don't get bored, they'd put it into the new album.
Yeah, 100%.
You've done it for years, you've got to do something different.
No, and plus, if they were playing that new album every week, the audience definitely going to get bored because it's shite.
Yeah, I'm not a fan personally. I'm very much a first album Arctic Monkeys fan.
Yeah, innit?
But yeah.
Going back to the nerd talk, I want to ask you some nerdy questions about like equipment and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself gravitating towards like certain specific like brands of gear and stuff like that, or are you pretty much like you like different things from different places?
I like to give everything a go, but then you find your favourite, and if you have the choice, like it depends on the kind of gig we're doing as well, because aside from all this like the fun rock and roll stuff that we'll talk about, we do a lot of corporate stuff on the side just to fill in the gaps, and obviously you don't want to take this big rock and roll mixing desk to a corporate gig, so you just find your preferences really. As you know, I'm a big fan of all the SE microphone stuff at the moment, thanks to Deck. We can give them a shout. But it's so you find your stuff and you're just like, I want to use this, but then eventually something else comes along and you move on.
Yeah, them SE things are game changers. Obviously, like you got me onto them as well, and they're absolutely unreal. Like all of the V Beats stuff is sick as well. Like for drums and it's
100%.
Like
it just makes our job so much easier. Like they've thought about the right things.
Yeah,
and done it affordably. It's good.
Would you obviously you're a live sound engineer, but is there any scope in the future, or would you ever go into studio work?
I'd absolutely love to give it a go on the side, like just for that creative element, because everything from studio straight away translates to like live. I'm not sure if it's the opposite way around, to be honest. I'm not sure if live fully translates to studio, but definitely studio stuff. Once you get to that, like once you mix in front of house, you can use absolutely everything. Like it's more the effects side of it. How I sometimes get envious of how much you get to like get creative with effects and stuff like that, and how you can just get that sound you want.
I suppose it's because we have the as studio engineers can sort of like have the time, like you were saying before, we have the time to try something. If it's shit, then we can just say, bin that off, like we'll try something different. But I suppose like you can't exactly say like, oh, let's try a flanger on his vocal, and if it sounds good, then we'll keep it. If it sounds shit, then the audience are gonna go mad and it's gonna sound shit, and the band are gonna hate me. That's
it. Yeah, it's we normally have half an hour to an hour to get a band ready, and that doesn't include well this is in my scenario again because I'm normally more of like the house tech kind of guy, but you never really have much time in a sound check to get it going, and that's how it's going to sound in the gig.
So if someone's sort of in that position now where they're looking to get into the industry, because you don't feel like you'd need to pigeonhole yourself into be like, right, I'm gonna be a live sound engineer. You think you can sort of build your skill set, keep it broad, and then you feel like those skills are sort of interchangeable to a certain extent.
Yeah, 100. You put it perfectly there. Yeah, they're to a certain extent. I mean, if you come from studio and start at live sound, you're gonna still have to learn a lot of stuff, and it's gonna be an eye opener. But you're gonna be further ahead than someone who's never touched the mixing desk in their life. You know what I mean? It's you've always got that. And then there's certain times I've met front of house people who've only just got into live sound, but they're working with huge bands because the bands have heard them in the studio and went, I love the way they can get that sound. Let's see how it translates to live. As long as they can get used to making them compromises for it coming out of a PA, and there being, restrictions in the room and people in the room, restrictions live as well, because, all it takes is for a microphone to fall on stage. It's rare, but it could happen. And then, your guitar's going to sound a lot more ambient and different, and you've just got to work with that. That's how it is.
I seen an article, I think it might have been like Sound on Sound magazine or something like that, and Green Day said that they loved their studio sound so much on this one particular album, one of the later ones, one that's not as big as obviously like American Idiot and all that. They loved it that much that they brought the engineer they used, and they brought the desk.
Wow.
So they brought like a Neve VR Legend, big massive like huge desk on the road, which I thought was like mad.
That's it. Yeah, that's incredible.
It must take some lugging, and the power for that must be pretty nuts. Because I remember we had a Neve in uni, and the power supply for it like took a whole room.
Yeah,
it was like mental.
It blows my mind now, like the difference in, because obviously in studio that's fine. You get a big room, you throw it in a corner, and you're done. But when that's got to go on and off a truck, 50 times on a tour, it's the people helping you out to do that truck are gonna hate you. So yeah.
Obviously, we're quite early in the year as well. Now, obviously, you had that big tour last year. Got anything this year that you're there's not confirmed or booked in yet, but you're like, oh, I'd love to do that this year, because you already had a big year with Glastonbury last year. Is there anything bigger?
Yeah,
Coachella.
No, I don't think so. Obviously, it depends on what the company get, because I work for the one company. So I think I'll be doing the same festivals as last year, pretty much, which is like Glastonbury, Creamfields, maybe Kendall Colin. It just depends on who they need where, basically. We only find out like a couple of months in advance what we're doing, so I don't quite know about summer yet. But we've just been given our tour for March, which is pretty cool. It's going to end up on the CV. Yeah. We've managed to grasp Snoop Dogg, which is going to be
nice
up there. Yeah, nice, that'll be really cool.
Are you excited for that then?
Oh yeah, I couldn't believe it when I found out. I actually found out by another guy from our work texting me going, oh, we're going to be doing Snoop together. I was like, wait, what? Like, I must have read this wrong. And then went on, like, we have an app to see where we're working and what. I went on the app and was like, that's cool.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Where are you doing that? Is that like a UK tour, or is it like a gig, or like a one-off gig, or?
Yeah, no. So we're just the PA and light supplier for his UK section of a huge tour, basically. And the schedule is absolutely crazy. I don't know if it's to do with like still the post-COVID thing, people struggling to rearrange gigs, or because normally they'd make it so you go from an arena to the closest arena to the closest arena again. But this is his tour is crazy. It's like he's doing, don't quote me on this, but he's doing like Manchester and then flying to Europe and then coming back to do Leeds. And you're just like, and that's within 2 days or 3 days. It's just
not very like logical.
Yeah,
it's like
just
the order of it.
crazy, absolutely crazy. But it should be amazing. It's definitely up there for me because it's just he's one of them artists that is just huge.
It
like,
probably doesn't matter for
huge.
Snoop Dogg as well because he probably won't know where he is anyway because he's going to be stoned anyway.
Yeah.
That's such a mad act though, because that's like one of those acts. Because if it was a current act that was that big, let's just say it was like, I don't know, Harry Styles. It's obviously one of the biggest acts in the world, but Snoop Dogg's like a name that's been around for like years.
He's
That's
like
such
an
a
icon.
great- Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like an icon.
I mean, was he Super Bowl last year? Did he do the Super
Yeah,
Bowl?
it's insane.
It's just insane. Can't.
Did it with like Dr. Dre and stuff, didn't they? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
he's
that one.
part of that whole sort of clique of people, isn't he? It's like you
Yeah.
don't get much bigger than that in like the hip hop world, do you?
It's just amazing. I can't wait. But,
Like he's mates with Eminem and Dre. Like, it's insane, isn't it?
And maybe he'll bring someone out on one of his shows.
Yeah, that's it. Well, there's names of celebrities that are like big, and you kind of like, oh yeah, you know, if you bump into them, you're like, oh, that's them, whatever. But then there's some celebrities that are just so big, it's almost like they don't even exist.
Yeah, like they're not
You know,
real.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're almost characters
And
in this.
He's definitely one of them, and we get over the starstruck thing really quickly in our job because you have to. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're that engineer who gets hired for someone, and then you're like, oh my god, could I get a photo? They're just, they're gonna be put off you straight away.
You have to keep that internal.
Suppose it's like
yeah.
keep it professionalism.
That's it.
not on the same scale, but like we've worked with for like Man City and United and things like that, and it's a similar sort of thing, isn't it? Like Haaland Haaland opened a door for you, didn't you? And you were like, oh my god, but then you just sort of like you're working with him in 5 minutes, so you just got to sort of like
Yeah, I was like, cheers,
keep you
mate.
chill.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. But then after a year, you quickly realise they're just people as well. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
the majority of them are really nice people. Like, they end up having a chat and they'll approach you, and you're just like, oh yeah, fine. But
Yeah,
it's mad.
that's crazy.
Mad.
So outside of music and sort of like career and everything like that, obviously I know because I play with you, but you're into ice hockey.
I am, yeah.
So
That's the-
tell the world who your team is.
Currently playing for what, support or
Both.
well, I support St. Louis Blues.
What's the story behind that? Because I know it's a cool story.
Well, I was just looking through the thing. I had no interest in ice hockey until I started playing, and then was like, maybe I should watch some as well. And then obviously had to pick a team, and was like, I'm an Everton fan already in football, so I was like, Blues.
Unlucky.
I know, eh? I was like, Blues, that works. They're called St. Louis, and I'm Lewis, so And then also obviously the city or town is huge on music. It's like a blues music thing. Even their logo is obviously like the music logo, yeah. So it's just like there's too many reasons. I just have to support them.
And what's the Stanley Cup predictions for this year then?
We're probably not even going to make it, are we? I mean, I don't know. I fancy Bruins the way they're playing this year.
Yeah, they're
It's
pretty mad this
ridiculous,
year,
isn't it?
aren't
But yeah.
So anything to get in on the ice hockey front, Ollie? Ollie has no clue.
Well, my opinion on this whole thing.
But that brings us to the end of the podcast anyway. So thank you very much, Lou, for joining us this week.
Yeah, cheers, mate. It's good. It's good to get a different insight because I know obviously in the world of audio so much with Joe, but it's good to see it from like that live side and stuff. So
Yeah.
really interesting to like hear about how it works and stuff. So thank you very much for coming in.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all the listeners and the viewers. Again, if you're new to the podcast, go and subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Music, all the usual platforms, and we will see you or hear you or no, we will speak to you
Yeah.
next week. Nice one.
They will hear us.
They will hear us. You will hear us next week. Right. See you later.
Cheers.